Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome back to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville government, politics, education, business, news, arts, entertainment, who knows, whatever gets our attention. My name is Jesse Mayshark. I am co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. I am joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, and also birthday boy today. Happy birthday, Scott. He's very excited, as you can tell.
Well, I mean, you get to a certain age, and birthdays take on a different meaning.
Right.
They're not, in some ways they're you should celebrate them more. I lasted another year, but another way it's kind of like, hey, I've had, in my case,
one more gone.
In my case, I've had, I had 60 before this one. So, this one's, it's like anything else. It kind of diminishes in importance the more you have them. So,
yeah.
But thank you very much. It was.
Yes. I hope you have a good one, regardless.
I plan to have a good one. Very low key. They get lower key as you get older as well. So, so there's not going to be. People don't have to be concerned about wild parties in the Bell Morris neighborhood of North Knoxville tonight. But I'll have a good time.
All right. Well, as part of your birthday celebration, we will talk about local government and politics. What better way to celebrate, really?
Yeah.
This week, we are, you may remember last week, we mostly did a sort of year in review of city, county, school system, etc., everything that happened in 2023, or at least some of the major things that happened. This week, we are going to look at what could happen in 2024. And, of course, we're going to talk about state government. We're going to talk about our local education institutions. We're going to talk about the city of Knoxville. But to start us all off, we will talk about Knox County government. A couple of major things happening in Knox County this year. And, of course, we should say, Scott, with all of these previews, we don't know what's going to happen.
No. Things could change next week.
Right. If we had been doing this in, January of 2020, we would have totally missed what was actually going to happen. So in all of these realms, all we can do is say, here's the way things are kind of shaping up right now. Lots of X factors, black swans, whatever kinds of things you want to call them, can and will also arise over the course of this year.
Yeah, well, one of the things too is with our limited knowledge about what could happen, really only extends the first few months anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, if I for one am very hesitant to predict something that might happen in August or September or October of next year. So
yeah.
A lot of these things are things we kind of know are coming down the track because of what happened in the previous year.
Right. Things that are already to some degree underway or have been signaled. And so turning to Knox County, the biggest issue that is kind of carrying over into 2024 from 2023 is the Advanced Knox Planning Update we have talked about this a lot over almost the last 2 years, that basically went through a series of public input sessions. The county has not updated its general plan or its growth policy plan in about 20 years, a little more than 20 years, actually. And the ostensible drive behind all of this is to modernize and update the county's plans and designation of different areas of the county for future growth and development in line with what has happened over the last 20 years since the last time they did this plan. But where we are right now is they went through that advanced Knox process, and then County Mayor Glenn Jacobs' administration boiled all of that down to, first of all, a proposed amendment to the county growth policy plan. The growth policy plan is required by state law, and basically what it does is it's the big picture vision of how the county sees future growth and development proceeding, where it wants to see more growth, more density, where it wants to protect existing rural areas and green space and allow only more limited kinds of growth. And basically what this amendment does, well, it does a couple of things. It changes the planning process significantly. So it does away with sector plans, which is something that the Planning Commission has been doing for decades, where they have the overall general plan for the county, but then they break that down into individual sectors on a sort of rolling basis. They go and do more intensive plans in each sort of part of the county. And this would do away with that altogether. Everything would just be under this one sort of comprehensive plan. And then specifically, it redraws the growth map. And the thing that's created so far the most discussion and opposition is specifically taking about 17.5 square miles of current rural areas that are currently labeled and designated as rural and changing them to what they call planned growth areas, which would basically just allow more kinds of development, more intensity of development in those places. And a coalition, we've talked about this, of farmers, conservationists, residents, homeowners associations, and so forth, has come together to raise concerns about this, basically saying that the plan doesn't do enough to protect those rural areas, to protect that farmland. So that is the biggest, from a sort of governing policy standpoint, that's the biggest thing facing the county right now. We're going to talk about this at the end of the podcast. There's actually a meeting on this next week. So this is going to be moving, as you say, rather quickly in the first few months of the year. But just to recap, it has to go through this Growth Policy Coordinating Committee. Then whatever that committee recommends or doesn't recommend, the proposed changes go to our local legislative bodies, County Commission, Knoxville City Council, Farragut Board of Mayor and Aldermen. All three of those have to sign off under state law to any changes to this. And so there's going to be a lot of meetings about this. There's going to be a lot of discussion about it. Public engagement was a little bit slow, but it has picked up over the course of these Growth Policy Coordinating Committee meetings. We should say we're recording this on Friday. We are anticipating that sometime during the day today, there's actually going to be an updated version of this proposal with some revisions, but we don't yet know what those are. So by the time this comes out, some of those revisions may be there, and you can see all of that if you go to the advancedknox.org website. But this whole question of growth, how the county grows, where it grows, and really whether Mayor Jacobs is able to kind of push through what he's been trying to do for several years now, which is to allow greater intensity of development in more places in the unincorporated parts of the county. So that's kind of the big picture policy issue that's on the horizon for county government. The other big thing, of course, that is going to happen in county government is elections. We've talked about this. This is an election year. The first round, the county primary, is coming right up March 5th because it's in line with the presidential primary. And there's a lot of seats on the ballot. 7 out of 11 county commission seats, 4 out of 9 school board seats are up, and only a handful of incumbents on either commission or school board are running. So out of those 7 county commission seats that are up, only 2 of them have incumbents running. So even if both of them get reelected, at a minimum, we're going to have 5 new members of county commission sworn in September. Who those commissioners are, both what party they are from, but also sort of what their priorities are, who supports them on their run for office and so forth. All of that could have a pretty major impact. Like when you turn over 5 members of an 11-member body, like that's a pretty big change.
It is a big change, and it will, and as you said, depending on who is elected and what their priorities are, could actually change a little bit of the direction of where county commission goes.
For sure. And send some signals about what the priorities of the community and in those districts are.
Right, absolutely. And we're getting to, tying back to the growth policy stuff, that's going to happen early in the year. And if people are displeased, they could elect one set of commissioners, and people who are relatively pleased could elect another set of commissioners.
Yep.
It could be, and they would, they'd be stuck with a plan, assuming it's approved, but that they would be the ones in charge of, when rezonings come to county commission and things like that, the nuts and bolts of actually implementing the plan will come to them, and they will be the ones making those decisions.
Yeah, and I think that those growth issues are going to be a major factor in those elections, sort of not regardless of what happens in the interim, but all of those candidates are going to be paying a lot of attention to this discussion, and they are also likely to be asked a lot of questions about it by interested people in their various districts, whether those are homeowners groups or developers or whoever. But it's especially, I think, in the 5th and 6th commission districts, which cover Farragut and Concord and Hardin Valley, and then also in the 8th and 9th, which is kind of the East Knox, South Knox County, the more rural areas. I think those are going to be major issues. So we will talk about all of those county races in more detail in the coming weeks so that you can make an informed decision. But just be aware that that's coming up soon. Early voting actually starts on Valentine's Day. So we're not very far away from people having to make decisions about all of this. And the city of Knoxville, meanwhile, Scott, of course, does not have an election this year. And so this is what we call a governing year for the city. Yeah,
it's a governing year. The very similar issues with the city as far as growth and development. They can't grow their boundaries very easily. The state law prevents major annexations, and so it's focused on growth within the existing boundaries. Housing, as we've talked about almost every week for the last year, is a big issue, and later this month, again, something happening early. The Mayor India Kincannon's administration supposedly is going to be coming out with a comprehensive plan. They've kind of been hitting at housing piecemeal over the past year, and this will as at least as it's been explained to me, will be more of a comprehensive plan with lots, addressing lots of different elements instead of just one element at a time. And so one of the interesting parts that it's already been, the mayor's already said she's hoping to be able to do this, is to enlist some of Knoxville's philanthropists, the philanthropy community, in raising more dollars for affordable housing in particular. City this year is spending $7.5 million of its own taxpayers' money. There's also a pot of federal money that they spend on affordable housing. It's about $7.5 million this year. That's used to provide incentives to developers to actually build it. The city doesn't build new affordable housing projects on its own very often. So these are to help with the financing of private developments. And the goal is to have donors come in and provide about $3 million a year. It's the goal anyway, which would put the, assuming that the city continues at $8 million a year, which is what they've been doing the last 3 years. That would put over $10 million a year into affordable housing, at least for the next few years. So that's that would be a major influx of dollars for housing. There are plenty of other housing initiatives that we've already talked about. The middle housing effort, which isn't an affordable housing thing, it's a housing density measure. The city council members have really been agitating to get more dense mixed-use residential development along the city's corridors. The city can already offer incentives for property owners who have properties along corridors to do things like this, but they haven't really emphasized it. It really hasn't been done very much. It would be, I wouldn't go so far as to say that what the city council members are talking about would replicate what's going on Cumberland Avenue, on Chapman Highway and Kingston Pike and Clinton Highway, and that. But it could be similar.
Right, some pieces of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, not all of Broadway or Chapman Highway is going to be lined for their entire lengths with, 6, 7, 8-story apartment buildings, but that's the kind of thing that they would like to see at least some of in those areas.
Yeah, they would. That's a way to, to increase density without really directly affecting single-family neighborhoods. You can put apartment buildings along Broadway and not encroach on Oakwood Lincoln Park or 4th and Gill. You can put development along Chapman Highway and not encroach on any of the Lake Forest neighborhood, for example, down in, of course, that would be difficult logistically anyway, but given the topography, but really, if they can get higher density developments along corridors, then they don't have to necessarily fight over density in these single family neighborhoods. So.
Right, and if you can put like 200 apartments in a building or a complex versus the amount of land and intensity of development you would have to do that in single family housing in a city neighborhood, that's a huge difference.
It is a huge difference. And now I'm not saying that everybody in these neighborhoods would be all excited about it, because it would just change the arguments for and against.
You'd still have traffic issues and all those things.
Yes, it'd still be a lot of things that that folks would fight over, but it would, but something like that, like I said, it's already, they can already do it. I mean, if you own an underutilized strip mall along a city corridor, you could go to get incentives now to turn that into something different that would have mixed use, would have residential use, as well as commercial use. But the city really, I think, is the council members especially want to see that happen. So that's going to be something that comes up, that addresses what I think most people consider the biggest issue in the city, which is the housing shortage. And then one other thing that's going to happen in the city during the course of the year is some big projects are going to come to fruition. They are, or not fruition, the big projects that have been talked about, they're finally going to move forward with. One is, now that the public safety complex has been built at the southern half of the St. Mary's campus in North Knoxville, attention is going to go to the northern half, which is where the old hospital, the historic hospital building is. which was saved, and then there's a lot of green space there. They want to get a private developer to come in and redevelop it. That would increase the housing there because they're anticipating it would be at the very least residential housing, possibly mixed use. The McClung warehouses, which warehouses are no longer there, but the property is there at the north end of downtown, near the Broadway Viaduct, and it's finally going to be put up for to see if there are developers who would like to build that. That's a large parcel downtown that would be very attractive. I think a lot of city leaders think to development, and a lot of developers I've talked to as well think that it's a desired piece of property. You're going to have quite possibly the construction, or at least site development, done on the proposed science museum that the Clayton Family Foundation has proposed for the old safety building site, which is next to the Civic Auditorium and Coliseum. Now that the police department has moved out, that's there. They're going to be tearing down the old safety building in the coming weeks. They already have their equipment there. They've already done the abatement of the building. They're starting to do the demolition. So that could be something that really transforms. There's going to be a lot of things you can see coming out of the ground. The baseball stadium, or multi-use stadium, because it's not just baseball. But the multi-use stadium is the bones are up. You can see that it's going to be a stadium now, and progress will continue. It'll be almost complete if all goes according to schedule by the end of the year. And you've got possibly the pedestrian bridge. The city's still moving forward with trying to build it, and they're reapplying for a federal grant that they were really counting on to pay for a good portion of it. And the city and UT are confident enough in this that they've already bought property there for the southern end of the bridge. So if the federal money comes through, then quite possibly we'll see movement on that. So all these projects that will end up in long term have visible impact on the city of Knoxville are going. And plus, one last thing is the Mayor Kincannon has said that she is looking to establish a redevelopment district along Magnolia Avenue in East Knoxville to spur investment in an underinvested community. So that's something to watch for as well.
I want to interrupt real quick. I apologize. On the multi-use stadium project, since we're so rehearsed and not saying baseball stadium anymore. Do we know when we should start seeing the surrounding development going on as far as the actual, like, one of 140 million or whatever it is that we're promised around it? Yeah, well, one of those projects is already underway. They broke ground on that last year. It's harder to see because, like, from the roads where you can get a view of the stadium itself, it's on the other side of that. But it's the apartment complex is going to be along the left field line, essentially, of the stadium. It is underway. The other one along the right field line outside has not begun yet. That's going to be the office and condo development, and that is not started. The plan is to try that they're all supposed to be done early 25. Yes, the plan is so we should definitely see some real progress, not just on the stadium, but on all the surrounding stuff fairly quickly this year. Yes. Okay. You should be able to see, especially, like I said, the one on the left field line is coming out of the ground already, so you'll be able to see it, and then of course there are other people or other developers who have plans for projects in the vicinity of the stadium. I was thinking about the Greyhound building too. I was going to ask you if there's any progress. There hasn't been any known publicized progress yet. But I would think
on
we'll
it.
see something get going on that this year for sure too. So
It
this
would-
is the look ahead. This isn't what is actually happening.
Yeah, it would not surprise me to see that. We've got a hotel proposed for the lot next to Barley's in the old city, which is basically on the other side of Hall of Fame Drive, the overpass there. It's on the other side of it from the stadium side itself, and there's a developer who has bought that property a couple of years ago to build a hotel on. There might be progress on it sometime soon. So there should be some visible signs of surrounding development in the coming year, as well as a fleshing out of the baseball of the multi-use stadium. Excuse me.
All right. Well, let's talk about education. We wrote about this past week. One thing that struck me thinking about our two major education institutions, the Knox County School System and the University of Tennessee's Knoxville campus. It's interesting, Scott. I had never actually thought about it this way. But first of all, it's interesting that both of those institutions now have their headquarters in the same building. They're both based in the UT Tower, the former, what used to be the East Tower of Tennessee Valley Authority there, just north of Market Square. So both the UT System Administration and the Knox County Schools Administration are sharing that building. But also, did you know Knox County Schools and the University of Tennessee System overall actually have about the same number of students now? Because UT, between its graduate and undergraduate students at all 5 of its campuses, has about 59,000 students, which is right around what Knox County Schools has. Just kind of I had never, and of course UT's population has grown over the last few years, and so I hadn't done that calculation before. And the other thing that I think they have in common, although obviously they're very different systems, and UT President Randy Boyd and Knox County School Superintendent John Ryswick have very different jobs in a lot of ways. They're dealing with some of the same things, which is basically, both of them are fairly ambitious in their own ways. Boyd and Ryswick, they both came into their respective positions with kind of big plans and fairly ambitious efforts to reinvent what they do and how they do it in different ways. And at the same time, both of them are very much subject to political pressures, particularly from the state government. And we talk a lot about the different ways that our legislature sort of year after year finds new ways to impose things on the state university systems and on our school systems across the state, particularly as education has become a real political and kind of culture war battleground in the last few years. And so both Boyd and Ryswick are kind of captaining their respective very large vessels and trying to kind of do internal reforms, restructuring, reorganizations in the case of Knox County Schools, trying to push for more growth in the case of UT, while also kind of trying to navigate these crosswinds that they get from the legislature, from their various constituencies, and just kind of like keep their heads down in a lot of ways, not get caught in too much crossfire. So on the Knox County Schools side of that equation, Ryswick is now in his second full school year as superintendent, and he's continuing to, put this fairly ambitious reorganization in place. And I think we're going to just some of the things that have been put in place, like the 865 academies that we talked about, these kind of career track programs in high schools and so forth, those are now in their second year in a lot of schools. What will be interesting to see as Ryswick gets a little bit farther into his tenure here is to what degree we start to see substantive impacts from any of these changes. Does he, he's talked a lot about being data driven. And so I think the challenge is going to be, do we start to see some results of this, whether that shows up in, state test scores or graduation rates or, the various other metrics that are out there. This coming up very soon here, Ryswick is going to get his first formal evaluation by the school board to kind of grade him on how he's doing so far. And the other thing that is going to happen this year is the school board is going to update its own strategic plan. It has a rolling 5-year strategic plan. The current one expires in 2024, so they're going to have to redo it. I think one major issue to watch there that I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion about, at least on the board, is to what degree they maintain their emphasis on eliminating disparities, because that's a major plank of the current strategic plan. It's one of 3 major elements of the plan right now, is that the school system has committed explicitly to eliminating racial and economic disparities in student achievement and outcomes, and also in disciplinary procedures, making sure that certain groups of students aren't being disciplined, suspended, and so forth more than other groups. And in fact, they are. Black students of color, much more likely to be suspended. Even after 10 years of the school system talking about this as a priority, that remains true. Also true of students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. But since the last time the school board redid this strategic plan, there's been the board itself has become partisan again, now has a Republican majority. Ryswick, in coming into his position, has been sort of careful about how he talks about disparities, kind of de-emphasizing explicit looks at racial disparities and talking more broadly about, wanting success for every student. And so I think that question of how much does the school board continue to explicitly commit itself to eliminating those kinds of disparities versus adopting maybe somewhat fuzzier language around it, I think that'll be one thing to watch there. And of course, as I mentioned before, there are 4 school board seats up for election this year, and only one of them, the 2nd district, has an incumbent who's running for re-election. Jennifer Owen is running as an independent there. So again, we talked about big turnover coming on county commission. At a minimum, in September, we're going to have 3 new school board members out of 9. So we're going to turn over at least a third of the board there. What's up with UT?
Well, UT, there are a couple of things that the one big thing they'll be trying to do is manage growth. Enrollment is growing. They hit 36,000 students at UT Knoxville this year. The goal is 41,000 by the end of the decade. And the system as a whole has added about 18. The student enrollment's grown about 19% since over the past 5 years, and so managing that growth is vital. UT's building a couple of new dorms. They'll be replacing dorms. They're going to be new classroom buildings, things like that. Possible expansion of the campus at Knoxville, at least. But Knoxville's really driving all that growth. The other campuses aren't growing as fast. And one reason that's going to be vitally important is they've got a consultant study coming out that's looking at enrollment system-wide. And one of the things that's coming up is what in academia they're talking about, a demographic cliff, which is starting in 2025, the number of college eligible people in the United States is going to drop seriously. Now, major institutions like the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, other major public schools, competitive private schools really don't have anything to worry about, but smaller schools do, because they're the ones who are most at risk of having people. If the pool dries up, they're the ones who are going to be left high and dry. So the UT's taking steps to try to keep people going to its other campuses, the other 3 primary academic campuses, UT Chattanooga, UT Martin, and UT Southern. They've got programs there where they're trying to make it as easy as possible for somebody to go to, who doesn't get into UT Knoxville, to go to UT Southern, for instance, and then transfer to UT Knoxville. And they're making it easier for Tennessee students who are high school students who are top academic achievers in their schools, guaranteeing them admission to their campuses. So So they know they have a spot. It takes away the anxiety of applying to colleges and so on. So even though it's really not, the UT campuses are generally not super competitive as far as admissions go. It does. It could incentivize students to stay. So they're going to be doing things to manage that growth and maintain the growth, even though nationwide statistics are looking pretty grim for a lot of colleges and universities. The other thing that is kind of interesting, it's been interesting to watch Boyd over the time that he's been president of the university do this. He is really, and this is from his business background, he really emphasizes the land grant nature of mission of the university, of the responsibility of the university to help drive the state's economy, beyond just academics. A lot of states have, two major state universities. They have one that's the major research institution, and the other that's the land grant institution, or the one that does more of the engineering and agricultural stuff. If you want to think of it that way, it's, you've got the University of Alabama, which is the research institution there. You've got Auburn University, which is not. You've got although those lines have been blurred over the past decades, but I mean, it's traditionally been that way. Indiana, you've got Indiana University and Purdue. Tennessee, you don't. You just have the University of Tennessee, and it performs kind of both functions. And but Boyd has really embraced that business relationship deal, and he's doing it throughout the university. There are a lot of public-private partnerships now. The Cherokee Farms, the Spark Innovation Center, all of that designed to leverage university resources to help companies get started. You've got public-private partnerships building campus, structures. You've got the dormitories and the UT Neyland Stadium Entertainment District will be built by private companies, not the university. So you've got that. And it's affecting academic programs offerings as well. You've got, the new College of Emerging and Collaborative Studies that was created, which is its reason for existence is to be there for companies to be able to come there and say, this is what we need for our workforce. Design a program, a degree program for them, and they will. I mean, that's kind of the reason it's there, because it's to create new programs with the goal of educating the workforce that is actually needed by the state's employers. Even the new College of Music has a kind of business bent to it. As the Department of Music in the College of Arts and Sciences, it was primarily about performance. You learn. You go there, you play this Pride of Southland Band. You've got the other musical ensembles there. It put out educators. That was kind of the thing. Now that it's a separate college, all of a sudden a lot of the emphasis is on the music industry, and there'll be a lot of that's kind of where they're expecting to add their offerings to where you could go there and not only the music industry from a business standpoint, the music industry from a production standpoint, all of those things will be expanded there. So it's going to be interesting to see if there are other new initiatives that come forward over the course of the year, maybe the next year, that pushes that a little bit further. And really, I mean, I think one of the things when you look at Boyd's tenure as president has been that emphasis on practical business workforce development as opposed to just general education.
Right. Another similarity with Knox County Schools, too, because that's very much one of Ryswick's major focuses, is making sure what they call graduation ready, like making sure that everybody who graduates from Knox County schools is prepared to go to higher education, to go to a job, possibly to go to the military. But basically, in both cases, both of these institutions are very focused on this kind of workforce development. That's kind of the overarching, maybe to the detriment of other things that some people may value, especially when it comes to a university system. There's always been this sort of ideal of the well-rounded liberal arts education that just produces good citizens. Not that they don't want to produce good citizens, obviously. They've also established a civics institute, right? But that there is very much a focus on, like, what do people who come through these systems, what are they able to do? How prepared are they for the rest of their lives, basically? Always what education has been focused on, but I think in the case of Boyd and Ryswick, you have two leaders who are very specifically, not narrowly necessarily, but predominantly focused on that. All right. Well, the other big realm that we took a look at in our preview coverage this week, and again, you can find, we've written about all of these areas we're talking about. Those stories are all on our website. If you're a subscriber, you can go and read. If you're not a subscriber, you can go to CompassKnox.com and become one, and then you can read them. But the other area that we looked at was state government, which is the umbrella that affects all of these, because city governments, county governments, school boards, the University of Tennessee, all of them are subject to the Tennessee State Legislature. And there are a couple of areas that we expect to see a lot of action in this, or at least discussion in the coming months as the legislature returns to session in Nashville. Obviously, we've talked about this the last several weeks. Governor Bill Lee has made the expansion of school vouchers his kind of top priority, top issue going into this legislative session. And he has the leadership of both the House and the state Senate on board with that. He has put forward a 2-year proposal that starting this coming fall would expand the current voucher program, which right now is only available to income qualified families in Shelby, Davidson, and Hamilton counties. It would expand that, first of all, statewide, and secondly, it would take away that income qualified part, but it would limit it that first year to just 20,000 students across the state who would be eligible for a $7,000 voucher, scholarship, education savings account, whatever you want to call it, that they could spend on private school tuition or to help with homeschooling expenses. And then in the second year of it, starting in 2025, it would just make it theoretically available to any student in the state, depending on how much money the legislature decides to allocate to it. But a pretty major change to the whole approach at the state level to education, moving away from, the state providing public education to the state just kind of providing a pool of money that could then be directed by parents in a lot of different ways to their kids' education. Of course, we're going to hear a lot of talk about this, a lot of questions, a lot of debate, no doubt. It is not just because Lee and House Speaker Cameron Sexton and Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally are all supporting this. This does not mean that it's going to pass in the way that they want it to. There will certainly be a lot of questions. There will definitely be a lot of amendments offered in various ways, and we'll just have to see how all of that plays out. Beyond that, Scott, I don't think we're going to see much by way of major new initiatives. If you look at what Lee has done the last couple of years, first he put in place this comprehensive revamping of the state's public school funding formula and added about $1 billion a year in new state spending to that, which will carry forward year after year. And then last year, they pushed through the Transportation Modernization Act, which we've talked about the kind of the choice lanes as part of that, the idea that there could be these sort of like toll roads built by, going back to the public-private partnerships, toll roads built by private developers that then those developers would be able to collect the tolls on for a period of 50 years in order to pay for them and make money off of it, basically. But the other big part of that was a commitment of $3 billion over the next decade to state road projects all throughout the state. Those are big ticket items. But this year, I don't think we're going to see anything like that. You wrote last month about the report from the University of Tennessee's Bureau of Economic Research, or Center for Business and Economic Research, that basically forecasts a pretty modest growth in GDP for the coming year. So I think that the governor and the legislature are not going to be too enthusiastic this year about adding a whole bunch of new programs and spending because of that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that kind of I would take away from that report is it might be a good idea to take a wait and see attitude this year to see how the economy does, because it is expected to cool down somewhat. It's not expected to be bad. It's been really good the last few years, and Tennessee's economy has been better than the national economy. Which the national economy has been good for all of the hand wringing and shouting that you hear, that you see on social media, and you get when you talk to people. What's really happening in the economy has been pretty good for the last couple of years, and actually longer than that. Back to COVID, I think was the in many ways spurred the economy.
Yeah.
And
because there was such a huge infusion of public spending,
right? Yeah, and so while inflation, we had that period of high inflation that's gone away. People may not see that because the prices are still high, but they're not rising.
Right. They're not rising, they're not going to come back down.
They're not going to come back down.
People, I think that a lot of people's sense of the economy is just shaped by that. And some prices have, like gas, is actually back down to not far above where it was before the pandemic. But I think people are still just kind of thinking, well, my box of wheat thins went from 9 ounces to 8 ounces and now costs $1 more, which is true. But as you say, all of the other economic indicators, including very much employment, have stayed very strong, and wages have not kept up with inflation, but there is now some positive movement on wages as well. Yeah,
but in all these things are delved into in the economic report to the governor, but it is one of these things that the economy is, they are predicting it's going to slow down. So you might want to see where things are going, and I think that they're that other than the voucher battle, which it will be a battle, I think. The other big picture or big money items might hold off a bit.
Right.
On that.
There's nothing obvious that is going to be proposed.
And if you look at it, a lot of times the Tennessee governors will be, for a certain legislative session, there will be one topic that they really pour their lobbying resources into, and their and all that, and everything. And typically that'll be a big money thing, like the roads deal last year. But it looks like it's going to be the voucher discussion this year.
Right, and the vouchers, at least at the front end, they're not talking about a giant expenditure, because this year it would be limited to 20,000 students, so it's $7,000 ish per student. It's like $140 million. It's not nothing, but it's a tiny part of the state budget. The next year, where that would broaden statewide, could theoretically get very expensive if you have 500,000 students who want to do it. But the proposal, at least as it's been made so far, is that that'll be subject to whatever the legislature allocates to it. So it's not that it's just automatically going to be available to everybody. It'll depend on how much money's available.
Again, kind of a wait and see kind of thing, like we were talking about.
So. Exactly. Now, the other thing that I think we can definitely predict about this coming session, there will be continued discussion about issues like especially gun safety, there will be discussion about abortion restrictions in the state. These are areas that surveys of public opinion in Tennessee, including a recent one that was done by Vanderbilt University just last month, show that there's a lot of public support, bipartisan support for new gun safety regulations. There is a lot of public support for loosening our extremely restrictive abortion laws. And again, in both parties. Now, with both of those, as you might expect, Democrats are more likely to favor more gun safety and also less abortion restrictions, Republicans the reverse. But overall, the state population favors both of those things. The Republican supermajority in the legislature very much does not. They had abundant opportunity last year to address both of those in the face of, public outcry, especially about gun issues, and just, not only didn't do anything about it, but very forcefully said, no, we're not going to touch that. We're not going to do it. And I think that we can expect to see continued public pressure, especially around gun issues. There's already a press conference that's been called next week by one of the organizations advocating for gun safety measures, where they're bringing together students from across the state to talk about the needs that they see for gun safety regulations and so forth. I think we can expect to hear more public demand for that, but there's nothing that I see, especially during an election year, where if the Republican supermajority is worried about anything in the election year, it's not losing in the general election. It's getting challenged in a Republican primary. And so far in Tennessee, what that has tended to mean is, it has pushed our legislators to be more conservative, further to the right, for fear of being challenged in a Republican primary, because we have had Republican legislators lose primaries to challengers who said they were not conservative enough. We have not had yet, anyway, anybody lose a primary because somebody thought that they had gone too far, that they weren't doing enough about gun safety, or that they were too restrictive on abortion. People aren't losing Republican primaries over those issues. And so I think, at least for this year and probably for future years, unless and until those political dynamics change, it's hard to see there being a lot of action in the legislature on those kinds of issues.
I agree 100% on that. You're right. You don't hear of Republicans being accused of being too conservative and losing. So.
Yeah, that's just now that could happen someday in the future.
It could,
but that's certainly not the world we live in right now. Okay, well, so that's a brief look. We will certainly be writing about all of these issues, probably in great detail, over the coming year, and that will start with next week when Scott, we've had this past month or so where we've kind of talked about not much happening, over the holidays, not a lot goes on. Well, the civic calendar is leaping back to life this coming week. If you are enough of a, civic government enthusiast, nerd, whatever you want to call it, this coming week, you can do something every single day just about. And some of these days you can do more than one thing. So the week starts Monday. The school board will have its monthly work session Monday at 5 p.m., followed by its voting meeting on Thursday. So you can go to 2 school board meetings in the coming week if you want to, or tune in and watch them online. A couple of interesting things on the Monday, the work session agenda. They're going to get a recommendation on what to do with some land that the school board approved purchasing in Farragut last year. They may build a new elementary school there. They might build a new middle school. They might do some combination of those things, and then that will have implications for the existing Farragut schools. The school system presented 3 different options last fall, and then had a series of public meetings in November and December about it. They are going to be bringing that recommendation to the school board on Monday. I'm sure there will be talk about that. They're also going to get an update on their ongoing revamping of their special education programs and processes and so forth. So we'll hear about that. And then Tuesday, Scott, City Council's back.
City Council's back. While the calendar's full, the agenda's not that full. There are a lot of things they'll be doing, but there, a couple of things of note. One is this will be Tommy Smith's first meeting as the vice mayor. He doesn't do anything any different. The mayor chairs the meeting. They did have a leadership change, and Smith is now the vice mayor. They're going to be they've got a resolution honoring the memory of Cameron Brooks, who was a city council candidate who died last year. A brief battle with cancer, but was someone who was well liked and respected by people of all, whether they were for him or against him. And they're going to have a resolution honoring him. But the kind of most interesting thing on the agenda is, again, it's another development related thing. It's an appeal. Developer John Holmes has made from a decision made by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And what it is Holmes wants to build a duplex in Fort Sanders, which is, the city's densest neighborhood next to the University of Tennessee campus. He wants to build a duplex there. Well, that all sounds well and good. Each unit of the duplex has 11 bedrooms.
Big families, huh?
Big family, and one common kitchen area and a common living area, but 11 bedrooms. Now, obviously,
this sounds like a way to build an apartment complex without calling it an apartment complex.
Yes, it does sound like that, and that is in fact what the zoning administrator and again the Board of Zoning Appeals said. They actually said that this is an independent living facility and not a duplex. And the Holmes is appealing this. One of the things that's kind of came out in the BZA meeting is kind of the history in Fort Sanders, in that they used to look at this as kind of like fraternities, where they could build fraternity houses there if they wanted to, since it's next to the UT campus. And they, of course, they got that out of the zoning code during the Recode Knoxville thing, but one of the reasons they gave for rejecting this proposal initially was that it's in Fort Sanders. Well, the argument that's being made by the developer is that, I could build this outside of Fort Sanders and get it approved. Why are you not doing it here? And it is kind of interesting because when you look at the code, think about it. You can build an 11-room house, anywhere that the zoning allows, where you can fit it on the lot. You can build an 11-room house. And what is an 11-bedroom house, except 11 bedrooms and a kitchen and maybe a couple other rooms? But there's no problem doing that. I'm sure we have a few 11-bedroom houses in Knoxville, at least in Knox County. So now this is just two of them mashed together. Of course, the developer does want to, there are advantages of the developer to having it zoned as or determined to be a duplex. One of them is the building codes. They would have to. Duplex follows the residential building code, and an apartment complex or an independent living facility would have to follow the stricter international building code, which would require sprinklers, for example, things like that. So there are some real reasons for these things. The Board of Zoning Appeals just didn't. They said no, you can't call this a duplex. And but the argument on the other side is pretty compelling in one way. Is we just because it's probably going to be students who live there, let's not kid ourselves. There, you really zoning and building codes don't really regulate who lives. They don't really determine what a family is.
Right.
It's really shouldn't. They have in the past, and in our terminology still does. When we talk about single family houses, we always think about one family living there, but multiple families can live in one quote unquote single family house. So anyway, it's just going to be interesting to see how they resolve that. Similar things have happened in the past. In fact, the city allowed kind of let one as Peter Ahrens, the head of building inspections, admitted during the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. They let one slip through the cracks a couple of years ago. They had, I think, 7 bedrooms, but they're trying to keep that from happening. We'll see if they gain any traction at City Council on that. But that's kind of the most interesting thing on the agenda.
Well, also Tuesday, we were just talking about state government. That is the day that the legislature officially returns to action. So if you are a state government watcher, you'll be able to tune in and watch those sessions on they do live stream all of their sessions.
And Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, however, is going to miss it.
Yeah, Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally will not be there for at least the first few weeks. He's recovering from ankle surgery. Put out a statement this past week saying that he will be monitoring things, but for now, Speaker Pro Temp Farrell Hale will be overseeing the operations of the state Senate, and of course, we will be watching that and keeping track of bills, especially bills that our local legislators file and or things that affect our local governments and our school system and so forth. Of course, we'll be tracking all of that. Then on Wednesday, we were talking about the growth plan. The county's Growth Policy Coordinating Committee is holding what may be its final meeting in its current iteration Wednesday at 5 p.m. in the main assembly room of the city-county building, and they are expected to vote on Jacob's proposed amendment to the plan. Of course, all they're voting on is a recommendation. Do they recommend this amendment or not? Regardless of what comes out of that amendment will go to eventually Knox County Commission, Knoxville City Council, and the Farragut Board of Mayor and Aldermen, as we said earlier. They will all have to approve any changes to that growth plan and growth map. But this meeting on Wednesday, I think we're going to hear a lot more. I mean, we're waiting on some amendments and some changes to the proposal here, which again may come later today on Friday. And we will be writing about this all week next week. Make sure that you know what's going on with this plan. And also, whatever discussion happens on Wednesday, I think we can anticipate there's probably going to be a lot of discussion of this plan at each of those subsequent bodies when it comes to them. So what happens Wednesday will not by any means be the end of this process, but it will be an important step, especially if they do actually take a vote on it and then dissolve that coordinating committee, because it will have accomplished its goals. And then on Thursday, as we mentioned before, there is a school board meeting that evening, but Thursday afternoon we have Planning Commission.
Planning Commission made more planning and development stuff, and this is their monthly meetings. I always have a packed agenda. One of the interesting things on this one is a proposed development that kind of ties into the growth policy arguments in South Knox County. It's a development called Thunder Mountain in the Dry Gap community, which if you really want to make people in South Knox County mad, you can say it's North Seymour, but it's the area, the extreme south southern portion of the county. It's a large proposed
Just
development.
a quick correction: it's the Dry Hollow community. Dry Gap is in North Knox. Yeah.
I apologize. Now I've offended people in both South and North Knox counties.
Don't you know your gaps from your hollows, Scott?
Well, there are gaps in my memory sometimes. I'm getting old. I turned 61 today, so
I heard that.
the development, they've already had preliminary proof for some development here. It's a large development, and they were going to go to get more approval for more houses on the east side of Chapman Highway, and they tabled that. That's one of the areas of the county that could be changed from rural to planned growth under the planned growth plan, which would make it easier for this development to go through. They decided to take this. There's going to be huge opposition here. They're going to table this, which means they're basically going to wait a while and kind of think primarily to see what happens with the growth policy plan. But on the other side of Chapman Highway, they're moving forward with a proposal to add commercial zoning along the highway and some townhouses behind there. I don't think that will generate as much controversy, although that's an area of Chapman Highway where speeding's a problem. That's one of the dangerous stretches of Chapman Highway as far as fatal accidents go and things like that. And
and especially anything that could increase left turns across Chapman Highway, because that is traditionally the most dangerous thing you can do on Chapman Highway.
Yes. I used to live in South Knoxville, not out in the county, but whenever I would go into South Knox County along Chapman Highway, if I had to turn left, there were places where I would go further down and turn around and come back, and so I could make a right turn depending on how the roads were laid out and where I needed to go. But anyway, this would be on the left side of Chapman Highway if you're coming into Knox County from Seymour, and it's so there might be some, there will probably be some opposition because of the Chapman Highway traffic.
And also just because there's so much ill will toward Thunder Mountain from the folks who live out there from the last year plus that they've had of fighting with them.
Yes. So I fully expect there to be some vigorous opposition to this. It may not be quite to the level it would be and probably will be no matter what happens with the growth policy plan when they come back with a residential portion on the other side of the highway. The times that this has come, and it's come up before Planning Commission and County Commission over the past couple of years. The residents down there show up with signs and make plead their cases very vigorously.
And they're currently in court with Thunder Mountain over the initial phase that did get approved by County Commission last year, and I think they approved about 150. I'm recalling that right. Units there on the east side of Chapman Highway, and
it was really originally going to be a lot larger than that. A lot more
right.
Units.
That was the compromise, but it's even at that. It is currently in court.
Yeah, this is one of those things. This gets back to the ridgetop protection provisions, in that this is a lot of this property is on Base Mountain, and they're not going to build up there. They're going to build, but that all of the property is used to calculate the number of units that are allowed, the density that's allowed. But in these areas, you build on the flatter parts, which means they're actually going to look like there's more density there, and that's where the roads in and out of the development will be concentrated and everything else. So that generated a lot of opposition for the, like you said, the first phase of it. This one will very likely generate. It has generated about as much comment, as far as people writing into the Planning Commission and complaining about the development, urging them to not approve it. So that'll be a battle the coming year, but the first skirmish is next week.
All right.
Or this week, actually.
We will be back next week to talk about all of those things and anything else that happens in the interim. I guess as we wrap up our first podcast of the new year, I want to say thanks again to Lord Seth Barber, our producer here at Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright, and we'll talk to you next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.